This is going to be a video talking about Tasmania in particular, but it's almost not even a video about Tasmania because I just think that it's really good to have in your pocket, in your back pocket for any instance to just have good examples. It's always good to have good examples because a lot of times with topics like this too, it's almost like there's too much. There's too many instances of this going on. You get used to seeing the same themes over and over and over again. Oh, it's just another guy who allegedly built 5,000 really cool places. But sometimes it helps to have an example, a go-to example. And I think Tasmania, it's just a perfect go-to example where basically everything on what is now an island of Tasmania, that's interesting too. That's such a cool topic, in my opinion. The idea of how different land masses have changed. Did Australia used to have a giant lake in the middle? Probably. And part of the early things about resets is probably busting dams. And I think that's a really cool topic. All the canals all over the world. And just that, I mean, is always, it has always struck me visiting the big cities and seeing all the canals. How did they build those? Anyways, this video is not about that. This video is about Tasmania and one particular example. But like I said, I think it's good to have specific examples. And Tasmania is a great example of how did one person accomplish so much? And it's easy. They didn't. They're lying. They're liars. That's an awful lot of old world buildings claimed by one guy. Not suspicious at all. Sarcasm. You'd think they break up the accomplishments and attribute them to more than one person to make it more believable. I've never heard of this guy before, but what an incredible story. And yeah, like I said, sometimes it's almost like if somebody asks you, okay, well, give me an example of somebody who allegedly built 5,000 different places. And you're like, well, I don't have an example on the top of my head because you just run into it all the time when you're doing this type of study. This is a perfect example. Go research Tasmania. If anybody's suspicious of this or just getting into this stuff, or you're trying to talk to friends or family about it, you can say, oh, did you know that like one guy apparently built everything on Tasmania? So first, let's just go through the major works of this person. John Lee Archer is, and this is right around the reset, as far as we know, the 1800s, the early 1800s, was such a volatile and crazy time. Something that I've been researching recently, besides carousels, I've been talking about carousels a little bit, is the what they tell us is early America currency. And go look up the greenbacks money, and the printing technology at the time was amazing. They printed, like, you know, the weird filigree looking stuff all over American currency. That goes way back and gets even wilder. It looks like they're using Photoshop or something to, I mean, obviously there's the way that these technologies work. It's oftentimes simpler than you would think, but they have tricks of the trade. You know, how did they make those crazy filigree old, I think they're called greenback dollars? Go look into the early history of American. I'll do a video on it. Just come back later. Anyways, let's look at this John Lee Archer guy. His major architectural works: Parliament House, Hobart, Treasury, Audit Department buildings, blah, 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 blah. What I want to look at is, I mean, you can pause and read this if you want to. I'm reading the left side. I'm not reading the middle part yet. Okay, so other works, ecclesiastical. So let's go through this left side and look at the dates and look at a chapel, 1829-32, a church, 1828, a new tower, Battery Point, 1836, 1838, another church between 1830 and 1833, another church, 1838. So many churches. This is something that people realize, that even today there's too many churches for what the populations are today. So, and most of these churches are historical in nature, so why? And then that's where they'll just say, well, everybody used to go to church. But aren't populations supposed to grow exponentially? That just goes into the population hoax too. They tell us that the world is so overpopulated today, but that's wrong. And our populations today are less than they used to be in times past. So many places today are abandoned, and so much infrastructure has already been destroyed, and we still can't fill it up. Anyways, a lot of churches, right? And what this reminds me of is, so I know people that work in like modern day bureaucratic city planning type things, and these days it'll take 20 years to build a new overpass where they really want to build an overpass, and yet these people are building ornate masonry buildings like it's nothing. Why can't we go back to that time? If they had smaller populations and they had less technology, and but they could build amazing things so fat, why can't we just do it like they did it? Shouldn't we be better at it now? But the obvious truth is that they didn't do this. These outrageous claims are just that. They're outrageous. And this guy didn't build 500 churches or whatever, all within the same amount of time. How could you even keep your head straight building this many things at the same time? Many bridges. A lot of bridges are historical and still around from the old world. And they built stuff to last, man. And so you can read all the dates and stuff. It's just so much that I feel like I don't even have to point it out. How could one person possibly build a dozen churches, a dozen bridges, all in a short time period? And these aren't nothing. Look at that building. So of course looks exactly like the old world. Why wouldn't Tasmania also have old world looking giant buildings? That's probably excessive today. Probably half the rooms today are not even used. Why not build a lot of military buildings too? All in the same time period. All in the 1820, 1830s. A barracks, quarters, powder magazine? What is that? Oh, a magazine. Yeah, of course. Okay, magazine. It also has like a military connotation. I don't know exactly. Barracks, a courthouse. This guy was busy. Courthouse. 2 courthouses? Are there multiple courthouses in Tasmania? Because, yeah, a lot of the story of Tasmania and Australia is just even crazier than United States. Because it's even fresher than United States. And it was supposed to be the convicts. So a lot of times they turned these buildings, or they said that they're to house all the convicts. Man, the Australia story is wacky, but it kind of goes along with their, Australia's quirky in the same way that Britain is really quirky. So it just works where it's like a Monty Python skit, how absurd it is, but they just roll along with it. So yeah, here we go. The majority of labor being carried out by convicts. Do you believe that? And something that I always rethink of is that meme of the chain gangs busting old stone into smaller and smaller pieces. That is what a lot of what the chain gangs did. They would dismantle the old masonry buildings, haul the brick to a location, and have these guys chip it into smaller and smaller stones until history is lost. Okay, honey-colored sandstone. You know, only the finest for fresh Tasmania. Government house, offices, treasurer's room. Wow, that sounds cool. Police offices, all of this in 1800s Tasmania. And this fake history topic, it is so ripe for the picking, and it's endless, the amount of stuff out there to research. And it's beautiful. It's thanks to the internet, really, that all of these old archives have been posted to the internet, and we all can look at it from the comfort of our home. You used to have to go around and visit these places and go to their stupid museums and see what the narrative is they're trying to shill. And nowadays it's just very accessible. And yeah, this is just a really good example to have. Like I said, I like to have examples in my back pocket. So now I feel more armed and secure in my, yeah, history's a bunch of bullshit. If somebody wants to have a discussion, I'll talk about Tasmania. I'll say, have you ever looked into the history of Tasmania and how apparently one guy built everything, and allegedly all with convicts? Same thing with USA, though. They'll say that they love that story. They don't have many original stories. They realize that a story works, and then they do it for themselves. But all sorts of places are allegedly built. They look like a castle, and they'll tell you that prisoners built it. That's just a common thing that you'll hear. They have a factory. They have a female factory, Maria Island. They're going and building factories on islands. 1829. Why not? Like earlier than the other ones, allegedly built a factory on an island. Okay. Oh, and even before that, a female factory. It's interesting. Female House of Corrections. Lockup houses. Because, yeah, they told that story that this place was like a prison. Look at this old place. And very interesting. The like three-dimensional cross up there, and we see those orbs a lot in the old world stuff. What else has this guy built in the same time periods? These are early. Chaplain's Cottage, Commandant's House. This guy was busy. What did his office look like with all of these plans? Must have been a very organized fellow. I couldn't possibly keep this many different jobs going. He built 3 hospitals, all in the same year. And a lot of these buildings, they do just say, oh, it was built in like a year. It was built in like 2 years, of course. So what do you think? Can one person build this much in such a small period of time? Lighthouses, why not? Skilled in everything. He knows how to build lighthouses, how to build hospitals, and in the old styles, and none of it's believable remotely. An infant school. So I think this is just a great instance of where they just didn't do that careful of a job. Tasmania, they figured it's fringe enough. They figured that, I don't know, they don't try to make their lies believable half the time. It's like the NASA stuff. They like to be campy because they know that's almost part of the magic, is to make it not believable, to get people to suspend their disbelief constantly. It makes you stupid when you're constantly suspending your disbelief and just taking what they say at face value all the time. You become very gullible because you're constantly believing outrageous tales instead of just saying, you know what? That's not believable. So that's how they trick people and make them stupid. They get them just used to believing outrageous things. So I'm going to just slowly go through here in case somebody wants to pause and read these things without going and finding this. But it was pretty easy to find this website. I'm sure you could if you wanted to. We'll see if I see anything. Often referred to as the bridge builder. So they have backstories. They get their education, and then they go off to a new place, and they make amazing things in amazing ways. That if only today, right? If only today we could have an architect build 3 different hospitals at the same time and like 15 churches all within 10 years. That's not the way it works. Like I said, I think in California, it takes 20 years. You'll be an engineer working on an overpass for 20 years. And, oh, you know what this reminded me of? I'm glad this reminded me of. Because the old stories that they tell, with all the financial stuff, when they get into the financial and the government stuff, part of me believes that they like to talk about that stuff just to make it boring. They really like to make things political and meta and more complicated than it needs to be. And so the point is, in their old stories, they're always talking about red tape this, red tape that. In a society that should be more or less, it seems like anything goes, and that there's gangsters running left and right, and people are being swindled left and right. But then they'll pretend like red tape is lying in the everywhere, stopping them from doing what they want to do. But then the stuff gets built. They're still building these magnificent castles, but they'll complain about red tape. So that's in their stories. But then today, I put that with today, where red tape actually is a thing, and it takes 20 years to make an overpass. Whereas, allegedly back in the day, they could build 3 hospitals in the same year in a place where, why would they even need a hospital? They probably would just have a tent, a first aid tent in a brand new place. You don't build 3 hospitals in a brand new place. He got busy, man. Immediately began work. Civil engineer, architect. There was a high demand for prisons. How does that even work? How does that work where you start a new place and allegedly your entire population are prisoners? And then you need to build prisons for them? The Australia story is not really believable. It makes you wonder what was really going on. Like, if at the reset they really did separate people into class, and there was like a troublemaker class of people, or like today with China and the social credit score, I imagine that at the reset, maybe there were people that had pretty low social credit scores, and they were wondering, well, what do we do with these guys? And they got dumped off in Australia, and it's interesting. So I guess that's where I'm at this point. History is almost becoming interesting to me now that I realize I can just reject all the stuff that I find very not convincing, and it just sounds like they're making up bullshit. But now to go back and look at it and figure out what was going on. They say that Australians were prisoners and all that. What was really going on? And maybe they were. Maybe they were the prisoners at the time of the reset, and they got to decide, well, what do we do with these guys? So, I don't know. Yeah, I think I mostly said. But this is a guy, go look into this if you want to. Man, Archer became isolated from his profession at the age of 47. Somebody so accomplished, and then little hope of employment, of local employment, because so this is a perfect example of, you might scratch your head. If you take everything that they say at face value, you might scratch your head. Hey, how could somebody so accomplished, all of a sudden they have no work to do? But if you understand the truth, it's really obvious. He never built anything to begin with. He took credit for all this stuff that was already there, and it already was way too much infrastructure. So they had no purpose for him after that. After he takes claim for all of this stuff, there's no purpose for you. They don't need you to build anything because there's already too much stuff, and you didn't build it to begin with. So it's not like, most artists or people, skilled craftsmen like that, where it's their livelihood. This guy building 3 hospitals in 1 year, I guarantee to you, he doesn't just hang up his tools one day and say, well, I guess that's all, they don't need me anymore. You would still want to build stuff. You would still want to go out there and get your hands dirty, build the next new big thing. But he just puts up a shovel or whatever at 47 and says, well, I'm done. It's because he wasn't needed anymore. They used him for his purpose of taking claim of all this stuff that was already there. Don't need you anymore. And then they just hope that these people get lost to the sands of time, and that, it's boring. So who cares who this Archer guy is? But shouldn't people care? I mean, he literally, allegedly, if you take what they say to be true, he built an entire island, which is pretty impressive. You'd think people would know about him. Oh, I don't know what that is. I'll just take that as a sign I need to go. A goal town was most affected by what's a goal town? I don't know what that is. So, yeah, kind of interesting, the whole alleged story of Australian being all these convicts, and they really need to build penitentiaries the first time they get there. But then chapels, too. Cruciform in shape. Huh. Interesting. A cell block beneath the chapel floor. Okay. To house prisoners in solitary confinement. There's some strange stuff going on here. So they turned one of the chapels. They had so many prisoners that one of the chapels with a beautiful courtyard area, they turned the courtyard into like, where you let the prisoners go, get their outside time, and then what was going on in the basement of this chapel, but then they turned it into solitary confinement stuff. It is interesting that a lot of these chapel-like buildings, it seems like they have dungeons underneath, like jail cells and stuff. Like, people used to be kept down there. It's interesting. Inclined floors, varying cell heights. Huh. No ventilation and no sunlight. What was going on there? Okay, so that's it for this. Oh, the tower has trappings of Renaissance Greek temples. Interesting. The tower of the chapel has a floor level that is 5 meters above. So that would be, and so that's not a way normal people build stuff. right? Normal people don't build their first floor 5 meters above street level. So usually the case is that that's not the first, the first floor actually sank down. And so then they have to build stairs up to what used to be the second story. And so yeah, this has all the markings of old world, and they need a quick backstory, and they didn't do a very good job on this one. So if you ever need a particular example, I think this is a good one. There's no way that this one person built all this wacky stuff in Tasmania. God bless everyone.